Hi, and welcome to Real Time. My name is Lauren Glass, and with me today is James Franko, Guidance Counselor at Riverside Brookfield High School, and Missy Hawley, College Admissions Counselor at Concordia University. So, how are you guys doing?
Well.
Superb.
So, Mr. Franko, my first question is, what is the difference between the ACT and the SAT?
So the basic difference is the ACT has, well, 4 portions and a writing section. So the 4 portions are English, math, reading, and science, whereas the SAT has 2 portions and a writing portion as well, like verbal reasoning and then quantitative reasoning, which is more math and science related. It used to be that the SAT was more like on the coast, that schools would accept that on the east and west coast. The ACT is actually made in Iowa to Iowa, and that was more Midwest. Now most schools are going to accept either or. So you can take, some students do better on the SAT, some do better on the ACT.
Okay, so is it better to get an A in a regular course or a B in an AP course?
A in a regular course or B in an AP course. I think the most important thing is that students aren't taking the easy way out, so they challenge themselves. And so it kind of depends on the class. Some regular classes are, you're being pushed. Some of them are kind of, getting an A is not that big of a deal. I'm a big fan of, I would say, I'd rather see a student taking a chance or pushing themselves and getting a B in an AP class. And I think most college counselors, I could be wrong, but they probably would like to see something. They like to see AP classes in general. They like to see a student challenging himself or herself. So I think all things being equal, I guess AP, B in an AP class, that's my opinion.
Ms. Hawley, so what are the academic credentials of the typical admitted student?
Sure. So for minimum, we're looking for a 20 on the ACT or the equivalent with the SAT and a 2.0 GPA.
And then what about class rank?
We actually don't consider class rank. We're just looking, again, for the combination of the GPA and the ACT to determine admission.
For financial aid, do you have any tips of some sort?
Well, 100% of students who are accepted to Concordia do receive financial aid. So the first thing that we offer everyone is a merit scholarship, again, based on that ACT and the GPA. And as far as financial aid goes, I would tell everyone to go ahead and fill out the FAFSA. If you're looking to receive any other aid, either from Concordia or the institution that they're applying to, or from the government, maybe there's some additional grants, so free money that's available to go to school, or even any loans that they might be able to take out to go to school as well. So that'd be my tips.
How many colleges should you apply to?
I guess it varies, by student. I generally say, as a decent rule of thumb, nowadays between 5 to 7 schools. I think that lets you sort of cover yourself. Maybe you get a public school or 2 in there. Maybe there's a school that you kind of are reaching for, but then also a couple schools where you're, especially if finances are a concern, where you're kind of an above average applicant to that school, so that merit money, scholarship money can come into play. And just to make sure that you have options. You don't want to go too crazy and apply to way too many schools. Sometimes kids apply to 20, 25 schools, like we've had that before. But if you've done research on the front end, and I think you can get a fair amount of schools that you might be interested in, and that you'd be okay with if they accept you going there, basically.
Now, this question could be for both of you guys. How do you help the undecided students? So it could be, picking the college, and then for you it could be picking a career, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, what about you, Mr. Franko?
How do you help the undecided student? First, I think try to make them aware of resources so they can educate themselves. Sometimes students are really lost. They don't feel comfortable even doing that. So give them some concrete suggestions, trying to ease their concerns about that. I think a lot of times high school students feel like, I should know what I want to do, or it seems like all my friends think they know what they want to do with the rest of their lives. But when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, it's tough to know that. So I think easing the concern a lot would be the biggest thing, and try to inform yourself, and then just go with your gut ultimately.
Yeah, I definitely have to echo what he said, is to not be concerned. I don't think colleges are going to be turned off, to a student because of that. Our most popular major is undecided. And then once coming in to a school like Concordia, that's a liberal arts school, you do have a lot of general education courses that you're going to take. So it's okay to take a little bit of time, take some of those courses, get an idea of what you really enjoy and what you really like, and then utilize resources like at that institution, such as the Career Services Department, maybe doing some job shadowing or talking to professors and kind of get an idea of what it is that you'd like to study. So.
Now, where can you find college information, like, various information about colleges?
Well, like here, all our students have an account with Naviance and actually parents. So Naviance is a program where you can do college searches, you can research about costs, you can actually see what RB students, what their GPA and ACT scores, and whether they got internet to certain schools. So that's a really good resource. I also like something called College Navigator, which is from the Department of Education. One thing they have on there is they'll tell you basically roughly how much it might cost per family's income, and they has all the stats, crime statistics on campus. So that's another good resource. There's so much out there though on the internet.
Now, Ms. Hawley, so if you take summer courses at the college that the student desires, does that help you get into the college that you want to get into more?
So you're saying if they were to take summer courses maybe at a community college?
Yeah. And then, or like just in general, like what are the chances of the person getting admitted?
Sure. If you have below 15 credit hours, we are going to only look at your high school performance. Mm-hmm. If you were to have more than that, we would look at the GPA of those college courses, and then you would be technically a transfer student, I guess. So I think it helps because, as far as admission goes, it's not going to necessarily weigh in on it, but I think it could prepare the student very well for college level courses, just getting to understand what college is going to be like and what the course level is. So I don't know that it helps or hurts for admission purposes, but I think it can definitely help the student as far as mindset and preparedness goes. So hope that helps.
Mr. Franko, what is a mid-year report?
Mid-year report. So some schools use what's called a common application. Mm-hmm. So it's about, I don't know how many schools it's up to now, probably somewhere in the 400 range colleges that you would, if you want to apply to schools, there's like a common, the common like demographic information, there's one essay question that they all kind of share in common. So that's the common part of the common application. And you'll submit your transcript initially, but then at the semester, if you apply before the end of the first semester, they'll also ask for your grades from the first semester of your senior year. And then there's a little counsel form that goes along with it. And that's basically the mid-year report.
So what is the school culture like at Concordia?
Concordia is it's a small private institution, and so because of that, with the small class sizes, it's a warm and friendly place. I think if you were to come and visit, you would get a lot of smiles from people around the campus. If you meet with professors, you'll just get to know that they really do have the students' best interests in mind. They're interested in helping you in and outside of the classroom. And I think just getting to know some staff and students, you would feel just the good community feel. It's a safe place, located in River Forest. It feels very homey community feel. So those are the words I would use.
What is the best way to prepare for your school?
Well, I think going back to, you brought up AP classes before. I think that is a great way to start to understand like what college is going to be like as far as the classes go. I think that's really huge. I think talking with your family about just like going off to school and getting prepared for that. I think there's so much that college has to do with classes as well as just independence and growing in just life skills too. So I think the best thing that students can do is talk to adults that really care about them, about just what that transition is like and having grounded friends. I think those things are really important. And I think doing well in school is definitely a really great way to prepare for college as well. So.
What colleges do other kids usually go to from our school?
So they tend to, I think all the state schools are always, it seems like on most people's lists, so especially like UIC, Illinois State, U of I, and then you get some northerns and a couple westerns, maybe eastern, southern, a couple southerns. So the state schools are always kind of on the list. And then local schools, private schools like, Concordia, Dominican, Loyola DePaul, North Central, Benedictine, all those kind of pop up on kids' lists. Sometimes I'd like to see our students branch out a little bit more. Like sometimes, a lot of times the students will say, I want to go to school in Illinois. Well, there's parts of Illinois that are 6 hours away, whereas you go an hour, east and you're in Indiana, or 2 hours, you're in Michigan. So sometimes I think they maybe miss some opportunities if they would just think a little, different geographically, because there's so many schools in the area, but the more options you have, the more you have to choose from, the more possibilities there are.
Do you have any financial aid tips?
I memean, my biggest one, generally speaking, is a lot of times students will say, how do I get scholarships? So my biggest one is, that's important, but there's the biggest thing is, where are you applying? And are you applying to a school where you're an above average applicant, or are you only applying to schools where you're an average or you're reaching? Because then there's no incentive really for those schools to give you merit scholarship money. So trying to look at schools where you're an above average applicant.
All right, well, right now we're going to take a break. Stay tuned in after these messages. Hi, and welcome back to Real Time. With me still is James Franko, guidance counselor at Riverside Brookfield High School, and now we have a new guest, Terry Casey from Dominican University, also a college admissions counselor. So, Mr. Casey, what is the best way to prepare for your school?
Well, I think the best way to prepare for Dominican or college in general is just that rigorous classroom work approach. What I mean by that, taking courses in college core prep classes, including your electives in math, English, science, history, and foreign language, and really just diving into that core curriculum academic experience.
So what are the advantages of community college?
So community colleges, so basically, wherever you live, it's kind of like you have your local high school where some of your tax dollars would go to your local community college. For most of our students, that would be Triton. And there's a little sliver, I think, of LaGrange Park that would go to college at DuPage. And so as a result, the classes tend to be a little more inexpensive. So I think a 3-credit hour class at Triton would be about $200 roughly. So even if you did a full load at Triton for a year, $2,500. So I think cost is a big thing for students as an advantage. You see a decent amount of students that, for whatever reason, they choose a 4-year school. They get there, and then within a semester, they're back here. And in the meantime, they probably spent, roughly $12,000, $13,000 doing that. One semester, maybe a little less than that. Whereas, if they're not sure about things, if they were a little bit more self-aware, maybe they took that time to try different classes at Triton, and a lot of those classes, if you go about it well and plan it out, can transfer to 4-year schools. And most schools, like I'm sure Dominican does have some kind of articulation agreement, do you think, with
transfer guides, articulation agreements?
Yeah, well, basically, if I take this class at Triton or College of DuPage, it's going to be this class at whatever school. And there are actually a couple programs at Triton where you can take the classes on that campus your last 2 years after you do your first 2 years, and you get a diploma through Benedictine if it's one school. I think that does something like that.
Okay, so Mr. Casey, what unique programs are incorporated into your school's curriculum?
Unique programs. Well, we implement a lot of service. It's a very service-oriented institution, so you're going to have your core curriculum, your major requirements, your electives and whatnot. That service component, a lot of majors have required internship opportunities, and we try to make it that experiential learning side of things just as important as the classroom work. What I mean by that is the outside the classroom experiences, like I had mentioned, your study abroad opportunities, service learning, which is community-based learning at Dominican, internship opportunities, and research.
Okay, Mr. Franko, how did you get credit for AP classes?
So every college, this is that I'm aware of, you usually have some kind of policy for for credit by exam, basically. So AP. There's also something called CLEP, College Level Equivalency Program, something along those lines, where if you score at a certain level, you can get credit at that school. So usually you look that up easily online, and they might say, hey, if you take AP US History and on the AP test, if you get a 4 or 5, you'll get out of such and such a classes. Other schools might be happy with a 3. So every school is a little different. Some are very stringent on what they'll accept. Will only accept a 5, and they'll only accept 2 AP exams, for example.
Mr. Casey, what is your school culture like?
Well, it's a relationship-centered institution. I mentioned rigorous earlier because we have a very rigorous classroom approach, obviously, to your education, but it's a relationship-centered institution. It's the type of place where you're going to walk in the classroom, your faculty's going to look you in the eye and ask you what you thought about last night's reading or your opinion on a certain topic. That relationship-centered goes outside the classroom as well, whether it be clubs and organizations, athletics. It's our students are a relatively active student, very involved. So I'd like to say it's a rigorous academic atmosphere with some very involved students.
So what do you look for in admissions essays?
Well, just that. We look for that well-rounded student.
Oh, okay.
Our average student at Dominican's probably like a 3.5 GPA, between mid-50 range of a 20 and a 25 on the ACT in the top quarter of their class. Also participating in various clubs and organizations, not only participating but in leadership roles in those organizations. So we really do look for that well-rounded type student.
Mr. Franko, how highly do you recommend college visits?
How highly do I recommend college? Yeah, I mean, definitely, at least at some point before you step on campus as a freshman, I mean, hopefully at the very least you've visited that campus. But yeah, any opportunity to see school, so it's kind of imperative. I mean, some students are lucky, you meet some kids who they've been seeing college campuses since they were, 6, 7 years old. Then you have other students that haven't had that opportunity, and they're sophomores, juniors, and they've never been on a college campus. So we actually do, in junior year, we offer a trip to usually 2 schools within about 2 hours. We take kids on a bus and they get to see some college campuses. So yeah, I think sometimes you have an idea what a school's like in your head, and when you set foot on campus, sometimes that changes or kind of reinforces what you were thinking.
Mr. Casey, how important are standardized tests?
It is important. Although, as I mentioned, we do look at the entire academic picture, that standardized test is probably that one common thread that we have amongst all of our applications. So it is an important role. We really suggest students, again, that rigorous classroom approach, but also maybe, take some standardized test preparation courses to go along with it to give you the best opportunity to test well. But it is important.
So it seems like a lot of schools, from what I see, I mean, they're mostly they're concerned about how you do academically in high school. That's kind of the number one, I think, telling factor how they're going to do in college. But that that standardized test piece probably follows that relatively closely.
What percentage of students receive financial aid at Dominican?
Last year, 100% of our students received some form of financial aid. And when I say financial aid, I mean academic scholarships, different types of grants, not only from Dominican, but from the state and the government, student loans and work study. 100% of our students received some form of financial aid.
Do you want to give any financial aid tips to any students out there?
Deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. Probably the most important thing. You want to make sure that that FAFSA form is filed soon thereafter, January 1st, which is when students are able to file that form. I want to make sure students register for their PIN numbers prior to January 1st. What a PIN number is your electronic signature. And I say PIN number because the preferred method of filing that FAFSA form is online. And then you want to make sure that you list the number of schools that you've applied to so that all of those students or all of those schools then have your financial information. I believe you can list up to 10 of them on that FAFSA form. So most importantly, remember deadlines, PIN numbers, and sending that information to the appropriate schools.
We actually have a FAFSA completion night. I think it's like late January, roughly, where families can come in, kind of learn some of the basics. If they bring their documents, some families have been able to finish their FAFSA that night. So yeah, just something to throw in there.
How do you help the undecided students?
Well, our curriculum at Dominican is split up into thirds, as I mentioned earlier, and that first third's that core curriculum requirement, and it's a selection of courses across various different fields: English, math, foreign languages, history, social science, natural science, literature, fine arts. So really, part of the coursework requirement is you have to take courses in all of these fields. Not to mention that we have an academic advisor. Each student will have their own academic advisor and kind of start pointing them in the right direction. So we're pretty proactive about it, and just as important, I guess, students find out what it is they don't want to do.
What do students most like about Dominican?
What do they most like about Dominican?
That you hear?
Well, I can tell you what I most like about Dominican since I'm an alum. And I love that relationship-centered opportunity I had to meet. I'll tell you what, meeting with my faculty, I still have relationships with them even now to this day. When they were writing letters of recommendation for me, and Mr. Franko and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, about my first career opportunity, they were meaningful letters. They got to know us on a personal basis, and to have that opportunity to still be friends with them and whatnot is fantastic.
So this question could be, answered from both of you. What is the best piece of advice you can give to a college student? You can start first, Mr.
Or like somebody, like in my case, like a high school student making decisions. I think to, try to really think this out. Do you want to go to college because what's the reason you want to go to college? Is it just something you kind of feel like you're expected to do? There's so many different ways to do it, and I think sometimes we drill in kids' heads, you got to go to a 4-year college. Well, I think like 25-30% of our kids go to community college, so that's an option. Maybe doing something with the trades, makes more sense for you. Some kind of post-secondary training, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a 4-year option. So, think critically about what's right for you, explore your options, talk to people, use the internet, and then just kind of go with your informed mind at that point and make the best decision you think.
And my advice to college-bound students is start right away as your freshman year. It's extremely important for students to get their feet underneath them academically. Colleges and universities are going to look at your entire academic curriculum. So start right away academically your freshman year. Take solid electives when that opportunity arrives in your junior and senior year. Get involved in clubs and organizations, and that's going to allow you to manage your time, so you'll be ready academically, you'll be ready socially, and you'll be ready time management-wise.
I just have a question. Which elective courses do you recommend?
Elective, once you get to take the core classes, your math, science, social studies, probably leaving one out there, English, maybe you put a language in there, but at that point, as long as you're doing well in those, try different things, explore different things, take a TV class, for instance, just to see if that strikes you. It can never hurt you the more knowledge you have. So,
what kinds of grades do different colleges require?
Yeah, it all depends. I think, at the minimum, they want to see 2.0, somewhere around there, but you have more opportunities, the higher you get that GPA up.
All right, well, I want to say thank you both for being on the show. My name is Lauren Glass, and I want to thank my 3 guests, James Franko, Terry Casey, and Missy Hawley, and we will see you next time.